Microsoft just spent about $20 billion on an acquisition. I'm not sure where you were sitting, but if you were hanging out in the Nuance offices, it's probably raining dollars right now. Microsoft announced a massive acquisition today. It's for a company called Nuance, and this is Microsoft's second largest acquisition in history. If you thought Bethesda was large at $7 billion, this is more than twice that. At nearly $20 billion, Microsoft is acquiring effectively a speech technology company called Nuance, who has a lot of really interesting IP, and there's a lot to sort of digest here, and still, honestly, a lot we're still working through. But officially this morning, Microsoft said, hey, we're going to buy Nuance for $19.7 billion. Now, you might have heard some numbers around 16 or so, and those numbers are all accurate. Here's the deal. They're paying about $16 billion for it in cash, but Nuance also has about $3 billion in debt that Microsoft will assume once they take control of the company. Now, when are they going to take control of the company? Well, much like any large acquisition, I mean, Microsoft is a massive company and they're buying another public company. This has to go through a lot of regulatory scrutiny and review. I don't personally think there's going to be too many hiccups, but at the same time, I'm not a lawyer in this area. So take my opinion here with a grain of salt. So what is Microsoft actually getting? Well, they're getting a very nuanced, if you will, speech recognition company. Actually, if you're familiar with Siri, that was part of Nuance. That is all integrated, and that is what Microsoft is effectively getting. Now, Nuance is really well known for their work in the healthcare space, and Microsoft recently launched a healthcare cloud, which is a suite of services running on Azure and in the cloud. And so this is going to help amplify and really make that more robust once the acquisition is completed later this year. All that being said, they do actually have a consumer line. It's called Dragon. You've probably heard of it and seen the million commercials. Dragon, like speech recognition and all that. Technically, Microsoft now owns a Dragon. It might be some software, but they own a Dragon. And so this is a really big acquisition in this space. A lot of healthcare industry professionals use this. It's among the best in the industry. Now, there's some really kind of like interesting things here from like a financial perspective. Because Nuance is public, they don't make a lot of money in comparison to Microsoft. For their last quarter, they brought in $345 million in revenue, and of that, they only had a net income of about $7 million. To put that into perspective, Microsoft's last quarter, they brought in $43.1 billion in revenue and had net income of $15.5 billion. Like Nuance's actual financials are honestly like pretty close to like a rounding error on Microsoft's actual financials. So they're not going to like be bringing a ton of business, which kind of brings up the question is like, why are they paying nearly $20 billion for this? Well, the reality is, and I think it's a lot of it is going to be a patent play too. Nuance has a ton of speech recognition patents. It's probably why their technology is some of the best in the industry. And Microsoft is effectively betting here that once they integrate it with their cloud services on the healthcare side, they're going to be able to pull over more customers that Nuance has already established into their healthcare cloud and really boost up that segment. Also, keep in mind that as of the last reported earnings, I believe Microsoft had over $130 billion in cash in the bank, in their back pocket. Now, that's cash and cash equivalents, and it's not all here in the US, but Microsoft is going to be paying cash for Nuance. Now, there's been also talk of other acquisitions in the Microsoft space. I got a ton of questions. People saying, Brad, can you talk about with Discord? Because Discord is another $10 billion transaction that was rumored to be closing effectively this month. Or I shouldn't say close, but will be announced. Much like this Nuance is probably going to have to go through some scrutiny. But either way, I don't think these things are necessarily related. I don't think because they bought Nuance, they wouldn't buy Discord. Microsoft is, I've heard from a couple different people, and this is more like higher up, that they're looking to invest their dollars. They've got a ton of money in the bank. For the most part, they've sort of stayed out of the limelight of this anti-regulatory and big tech is evil limelight for a while now, and they're looking to go shopping effectively. We saw them snatch up Bethesda. We see them snatching up Nuance. I don't think that just because they're spending big money on Nuance doesn't mean that they wouldn't buy Discord. For example, just as a single data point, let's pretend that they spend $10 billion on Discord. That is 1/4 of their net income in a single year. So It's not like it's going to be a big hit on the bank account because yes, $10 billion is just an astronomical amount of money, but they made that same amount of money in calendar year Q2 or fiscal year Q2, calendar year Q4 last year. So Microsoft is bringing in a ton of money. They have the capacity to do it. It's just whether or not the business case and justification and if the company is right. So this Nuance announcement is really going to be, I don't want to say transformative yet because we got to see how the integration works with Microsoft Healthcare in the cloud, because that is the big bet. Now, you got to believe that they're going to be bringing this technology elsewhere, and they're really going to be utilizing that patent portfolio that they are acquiring through this acquisition. The question is, how long is it going to take? Well, we believe by the end of the year. Is it going to get approved? More than likely. And then how long does it actually take for Microsoft acquiring the assets to actually bringing them in, having them fully integrated? Because remember, much like with the Bethesda, much like with any other big transaction like this, Microsoft has said, we have an intent to buy you. They can't make any decisions at that company until they actually sign and the dollar dues are handed over to Nuance. Like, they cannot make any decisions. They can't sit on board meetings. All they can talk about is regulatory stuff and helping them get through those hurdles so that Microsoft can actually acquire the IP. Both companies are public. I believe both board of directors have fully voted on this and approved it, but I believe Nuance's shareholders will eventually have to vote to approve it. But I don't foresee many issues there because Microsoft is paying a nice premium, if you will, for the company. So that is Nuance. That is what Microsoft is doing. And hopefully this answers some questions for some of you, because $20 billion is just an astronomical amount of money for an acquisition. And so Microsoft is, going down that route again. LinkedIn at $26.2 billion has, I believe, turned out pretty well for Microsoft. So they're not afraid to spend big. And it looks like, knock on some wood, for when Satya does buy a company, he appears, at least so far, we don't have a ton of data, even though he's been there for a few years now. It does look like he is better at acquiring the right companies and bringing them in-house as opposed to like those Quantive, which was a complete write-off, and so was the Nokia mobile stuff many years ago under a different regime or leadership at Microsoft. There you go, guys. That wraps it up. Make sure to keep it subscribed here, because the only BS on this channel is me.